Whether you're a fan of the unicorn vomit, the static colors, or just a relaxing breathing color, LED has come to improve the aesthetics of PCs in general and just give you a whole lot of choice in terms of personalization and how your computer actually looks, and well, give it your personal taste to it. However, keeping it all in sync can be a challenge, and this video is actually long overdue. I'm going to be covering RGB sync, so how to sync your components on your PC together. I'll be going over the Aura Sync, which is Asus's solution for synchronization. And it's kind of awkward because the video to fix crashes in Aura Sync is the most successful video on my channel so far. And I have not really made a review on Aura yet. I've been meaning to do it ever since I got my Aura gear back when I upgraded my PC. And I just haven't gotten around to it yet. At a certain point I thought I had, but I went back through the catalog of videos and I could not find it, so I guess I didn't. So yeah, here we are then. First of all, what is Aura Sync? Like I said, it's a synchronization problem to keep all your stuff running at the same, either at the same color, or to actually provide the opportunity to have some effects going on that will give you a lot of possibilities. Let's see exactly how to get it, how it works, and well, let's kind of talk about RGB as a whole at the end and the alternatives out there. For starters, you need an Asus motherboard that is compatible with Aura. That is, it needs to have some sort of RGB headers. There's addressable and unaddressable, which are 5 and 12 volts respectively. You can connect all sorts of controllers there from different brands, as long as they are Aura compatible, of course, and also obviously RGB LED strips, which you can possibly daisy chain if you want multiple. Or uses a 4-pin connector, which is pretty important since it really, you have to use Aura compatible stuff. If you were to go, for example, with things from other brands like MSI, Gigabyte, etc., they might use their own solutions, which are very often wired differently. If they're wired differently, you run at risk of either things not working or just plain old frying your hardware and just shorting something out. In addition to Asus's own stuff, like for example graphics cards, RGB strips, screens with backlights, all that sort of thing, other brands also provide support for other products, like for example the things that I own from Thermaltake. They have their own controller that is compatible with Aura and can sync with the lights on their motherboard. Not only that, but obviously the lights on the motherboard itself, if it has them, will also be synchronized via Aura Sync. Now, where do you get Aura Sync, you might ask? Well, the obvious answer would be at the Asus support website, at the driver and tools for your motherboard. If it is compatible, you'll be able to get one of two possible Aura Sync versions. It used to be very nicely inside at the utilities section, however, they have reworked it not very long ago, a couple of months back, and it is still under utilities, but there are two versions of it. The first version is Armory Crate. Armory Crate now has Asus Aura included in its functionalities. However, the standalone version is still downloadable here at the little footnote. I have both of them installed. I will go over why and the difference between each of them in a second, but the possibilities are there to have both installed, and just use the one that suits you more at the moment. Small footnote about the RGB headers on their motherboard that you need to have to use Aura. They are usually rated for 120 LEDs and 3 amps of power. This means that you have extremely long RGB strips. You might run out of juice before you get to the end of the strip. Usually you won't have an issue of overloading the header. You will probably have more of an issue of the lights at the end not really lighting up and getting any juice. As far as the LED control, it has been modded to 128, so there's that. However, if you need more than 128 LEDs on a header, you can get around it by using controllers. There are controllers out there that are just treated as if they're a very long LED strip, basically, so those transitions might work. It kind of depends on the approach of the manufacturer. Going over the software itself, I'll start with the Armory Crate version, and you can select which devices are being synced. You can, for example, not sync your memory if you so choose and just let it do its own thing, or the RGB strips, or the motherboard itself. And more importantly, the aura effects. You have a number of them here. However, I would like to say from the get-go that there are less effects here than on the standalone aura version. The standalone aura version has at least another 2-3 effects, so that is a nice bonus. However, this Armory Crate version does have its own advantage, which is that not only you need to have one less program installed, but the Aura Creator lets you create, export, and even share with other people custom-made Aura effects for your Lightning setup. It kind of deserves its own video, so I'll do another video later on to try this out, and I'm not going to export this in depth right now. Now let's take a look at the standalone program, which I'll be using for the rest of this review. Standalone program is the one you have seen if you watch this after watching my Asus crash fix video. It has most of the same vulnerabilities. You cannot use Aura Creator with this program, so if you are interested in that, just use the Armory Crate. However, if you don't, I do recommend having this one installed for one reason. As you might imagine from my mentions of having a crash fix video that is quite successful, RGB sync software as a whole seems to be quite unstable, and it will freeze, it will crash, you will have issues with it. Not constantly, mind you, but every once in a while you're gonna have some issues. When that happens, it's a lot easier to kill the process and restart it when you use a standalone program than with Armory Crate. And I have had more success at recovering it from one of those crashes with the standalone than I have had when I used only Armory Crate. So that's one of the main reasons why I use it actually. You have the same, well, effect settings, the basic effects. You have a few more than you have here. For example, the glowing yo-yo is not present on this, and that's just one of the examples. And you have some other settings, like for example, addressable strips. You can set up the number of addressable strips. RGB headers, you can calibrate them. You can synchronize if you have a hue bridge with other things like keyboards, well, headsets, that sort of stuff, and as well as enable in-game effects when applicable. You can also set an effect for your screen to go, for your system to go when you shut down your PC, when it's in hibernate or sleep or something like that. I just have mine off, but you can always have yours in whatever you so wish. Let's take a look now at the effects themselves. Before going into the effects in detail one by one, you can just check that, for example, you can assign a single color to all the LEDs you're applying, or you can individually select each LED. This goes mostly for your motherboard and RAM, and go LED by LED, one by one, changing to whatever color you want. In this case, let's change just one RAM on the dim slots to another color, and as you can see, it has changed one LED to orange. Let's try another one to some other color, this time green, and another one now should be lit up as green. You can select saturation, brightness, all that sort of thing up to your liking to make it shine more or less with more color, more brightness or less. In any case, going by the presets we have here, you can check static is pretty self-explanatory. It will just pick a color, apply, everything will light up the same color. Breathing, once again, you can control by area, saturation and brightness, as well as color, and it will be on a static color, breathing in and out in the way that you can see. Color cycle does not allow for a whole lot of customization. I would like it for, well, at least controlling the brightness and speed of the effect would be nice, but unfortunately it is not available at this point in time. It just cycles through the entire RGB spectrum. Rainbow. Now here you can select the speed, let's try it at fast, and it will go through the entire RGB spectrum, but this time in a bit of a staggered manner between all the LEDs. It's kind of the unicorn vomit that we are pretty much used to. The speed settings do make a big difference in how fast it goes. This one, for example, goes extremely slow if you have it at minimum, and you can select what sequence it goes from the RGB strip, in this case the controller, the RAM and the motherboard. Comet is, well, a little bit of light that just beams through the entire system. You can once again select the speed, the color, and the sequence. Flash and dash, I will just put them all on fast so it goes a little bit fast. Flash and dash gives a bit of a brighter flash of the one color that you choose running across your fans and other components. Wave gradually fills up your system with color one single color, mind you. It would be nice to have more options. I'll touch on this in a little bit further after I show you guys the modes. Glowing yo-yo. Glowing yo-yo slowly fills up your system from a low brightness setting to a higher brightness setting. Starry night gives you little flashes of, well, higher brightness, kind of like stars shining, I guess you could say. Strobing gives you a bad case of epileptic seizure if you suffer from such things. Smart allows you to monitor the temperature of your system by flashing at different colors at different temperature levels. You can set up the temperatures yourself and how fast it blinks as well. You can go by either the temperature of your CPU or the CPU load. Music lights up with the sound effects that your system is currently playing. It goes from the device audio and not from any other devices you might have attached, so keep that in mind. And it has a few different effects depending on, well, kind of compared, you can think of it as equalizer settings for light effects. Last but not the least, on and off just predictably turns the whole light show off or back on with the settings that you had selected. Now that is the point where I kind of round up things that I have said in previous videos when I mentioned the subject, but they are very applicable when it comes to a review of an RGB software. Like I mentioned, it does crash now and again, so it's far from stable, but then again, most RGB softwares are very flawed and Aura is no exception. That said, Aura is one of the best ones out there, in the public opinion at least, so there's that. I'm not saying it's perfect, I'm just saying it's less bad. There is also the thing that they have announced not so long ago, collaboration with iCue from Corsair, so that you can also control Aura gear through iCue, including things like motherboard lights, not just fans, but including motherboard lights, RAM dims, all that sort of stuff. You'll be able to control it via iCue. There's already kind of a user-made version of a control software via iCue that I have not tried yet, but I'm planning to and making a video of it. And I am also hoping that a unified software version comes along as quickly as possible to make the whole thing a bit more official, a bit easier to install, because the user-made fix for it and plugin does require a little bit of tweaking to get it to work properly. As for Aura itself, as it is right now, I gotta say I do miss some settings. There are things that you would expect considering these RGB lights, the addressable lights, they are fully controllable individually, so things like saturation, brightness, speed, that should be settings that should be available on every single of the basic effects. Things like the color cycle, for example. What if I wanted to cycle faster or slower? Or what if I wanted to cycle in a reverse order or brighter, or you name it? Why not? It is technically possible, so why is it not in the software? I get it that it's not a priority. There are way more important things like BIOSes to develop and stuff like that, but if you are offering functionality and charging for it, because RGB stuff usually does cost a little bit more, then you kind of expect support on the company's end. Speaking of support on company's end, I'm actually quite surprised because someone on that video I mentioned that I posted actually commented that Asus customer support actually sent them to that video to solve their problems, and while I flattered, I am not really troubleshooting, I'm not customer support, and I am just winging it like most of you guys. I just maybe do a little bit more research than most people out there, but in any case, I don't develop this kind of stuff. So yeah, and Zeus, if you guys watch this, hit me up for some other reviews in the future. Hint, hint, next graphic card series, hint, hint, motherboards, stuff like that. I'll take that as payment for my customer support. Now, in all seriousness though, the RGB trend is here to stay, it's safe to assume. I know some people don't really like it, a lot of people love it, but there is an in-between between the crazy over-the-top RGB and the tasteful RGB that you see in a lot of show systems. So it would be good to have the software support to enable that and make it a lot easier and less painful. There are a lot of things that can be improved in the RGB scene as a whole. For example, the double cables on some fans. Ultimately, I just kind of wish that all the RGB standards from Asus, Gigabyte, and ZXT, Corsair, all of those would just find a way to standardize it, make the connectors the same, so you could just pick the products you want without worrying about that. Not that that's the first thing in everyone's mind when they're picking something, but it is there. Yeah, you lock people in, but you also lock people out of opting into your products. Now back to talking about the program. The only comparison I have is Thermaltake's, which I used with the Thermaltake controller before I had an Asus motherboard. In any case, it allowed control over individual LEDs, it allowed control over saturation, brightness, and in every possible effect. I do have my own gripes with Thermaltake, to be honest, in terms of their products, but the software was on point, at least in terms of the possibilities that it gave you in actually setting it up to your liking. So that's something that Asus can learn a little bit with. On the other hand, the Asus software is a lot less clunky. The interface is a lot cleaner, however, the stability is also a little bit lacking. So that much I kind of have to hold it against them, because there is a reason why that video has a ton of views, is because it crashes a lot, and sometimes it's not clear why. Sometimes you just have to take the connector out and reseat it and put it back in, and it will work, and you won't ever have problems with it again. Other times you have to try everything and nothing works. Sometimes it was working fine, you just one day turn up your PC on, it doesn't work, reinstalling doesn't help, reinstalling your Windows doesn't help, reconnecting everything doesn't help, putting it on another header does nothing. So, and there is just no great way to troubleshoot it, and from what I hear, I've never actually went to Asus customer support for this, they are less than helpful in actually figuring out a solution, and most people just kind of have to suck it up. So yeah, my final verdict on Aura: as far as for motherboard firmware goes, and as far as RGB programs go, it's okay. It's one of the better ones, but yeah, that's not saying much when the general state of the sort of program is a little bit bad. I get it that the trend is still in its infancy and programs take time to develop, but I think by now it could be a lot better, especially when you consider the size of these giant corporations that actually manufacture these parts and how much of a hype they have been making for the past few years out of the RGB scene. There have been steps in the good direction, like the partnership with Corsair is definitely a step in the good direction, which I hope extends to most or all, hopefully, of the other standards out there for a bit of a better experience on our side. And, well, hopefully the hardware follows suit in terms of connectors and headers, etc. I won't keep you guys for much longer. It is a good software, but ultimately no one's going to be picking whatever they're going to go for the next build based on RGB and RGB software. For what it's worth, Asus's products are good. They are on, I would call it, on the higher end of the brands out there in terms of PC manufacturing. Keep in mind that if you are going with Aura for your system and you intend to get all Aura stuff, that's probably going to cost you a bit more than if you were to go with some of the other solutions. Pretty much it for Aura Sync. If you're having problems, try checking the solution on that other video I mentioned. I'll put it in the cards up here. Hopefully you won't, and you'll be able to enjoy your light show for as long as the program allows you. This has been Ethic PC Guy. Drop a like and a comment if you have enjoyed this video, and tell me what you think of the whole RGB situation out there. Consider subscribing to the channel to help us grow in the future and be able to provide more hands-on content and better videos for you guys. And I hope I'll see you guys in the next video.